A small recording studio in Nashville. August 1956. Johnny Cash is 24 years old, barely a year into his recording career. He's sitting across a table from Sam Phillips, the man who discovered him, the man who owns Sun Records, the man who decides whether Johnny Cash has a future in music. And Sam Phillips has just told him that the song Johnny wants to record, a song he wrote about his brother's death, is too depressing, too dark, unmarketable. Johnny Cash is being told to choose between the song that matters to him and the career he's just beginning to build. What he says next will determine everything. If stories about moments when artistic integrity collided with commercial pressure, when someone had to choose between truth and success matter to you, consider subscribing. This is what we examine here. August 1956. Sun Records Studio in Memphis, Tennessee. A small, cramped space that had already produced some of the most revolutionary recordings in American music. Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and now, maybe, Johnny Cash. Sam Phillips was 43 years old, a visionary producer who believed in capturing raw, authentic sound. He'd built Sun Records on the principle that the best music came from people who had something real to say, people who'd lived hard lives and channeled that experience into performance. He'd discovered Johnny Cash a year earlier, heard something in his voice, that deep, resonant baritone that sounded ancient even though Cash was barely out of his teens. The pain in it, the authority, the weight. Cash's first singles had done well. Cry, Cry, Cry had gotten regional airplay. Folsom Prison Blues was generating interest. Radio stations were starting to pay attention. Distributors were calling. Johnny Cash was on the verge of breaking through. But he was also difficult, stubborn, insistent on recording songs that Phillips considered uncommercial, songs about prisoners and workers and the American underclass, songs that didn't fit the formula of what country music was supposed to be in 1956. Phillips had been patient, had guided Cash toward more commercial material while letting him slip in the darker songs, had managed the balance between art and business. But the song Johnny Cash brought in that August afternoon crossed a line. Johnny had written it weeks earlier, late at night, alone. A song about his brother, Jack, who died in a sawmill accident when they were boys. Jack had been 14, cut nearly in half by a table saw. Died slowly, over days, in excruciating pain. It had been 20 years, but Johnny had never processed it, never fully grieved it. His father had blamed him, not explicitly, but in the ways Ray Cash withdrew, in the way he looked at Johnny afterward, as if questioning why the wrong son had survived. The song was called "The Man Comes Around." It wasn't about Jack specifically. It was about death as an inevitability, about judgment, about the moment when everything you've done or failed to do comes due. It was dark, biblical, apocalyptic, and deeply personal. Johnny had played it for June Carter a week earlier. She'd cried, told him it was the most honest thing he'd ever written, told him it would terrify people, told him he had to record it. So he'd brought it to Sam Phillips. Phillips listened once, didn't interrupt. When Johnny finished, Phillips set down his coffee and shook his head. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, we're not recording that song. Think about that moment. You've written something that comes from the deepest part of your experience, something true, and the person who controls your career is telling you it's not commercial enough, that truth doesn't sell. Do you fight? Do you compromise? Do you walk away? Leave a comment. I want to know what you think. Johnny Cash didn't understand. Why not? Because it's too dark. Radio stations won't play it. Distributors won't stock it. It'll kill your momentum. It's honest. I don't care if it's honest. I care if it sells, and that song won't sell. Sam Phillips stood and walked to the window. The studio was on the second floor of an automotive shop. Outside, Union Avenue was busy with afternoon traffic. Johnny, you're building something here. You've got a sound, a following. We're this close to breaking you nationally. But if you put out a song about death and judgment and apocalypse, you'll scare off everyone who's starting to pay attention. Or I'll find the people who need to hear it. Phillips turned back. That's not how this works. You don't find an audience by alienating the one you have. You build slowly. You give them what they can handle. And when you're established, when you've earned the right to take risks, then you can record whatever you want. When will that be? When you're successful enough that one bad song won't destroy you. Johnny was quiet for a moment. Then, so I have to lie until I'm successful enough to tell the truth? You have to be strategic until you're secure enough to be reckless. The room felt smaller suddenly. Two men on opposite sides of a divide that couldn't be bridged with compromise. Johnny stood, not aggressive, just unable to sit anymore. Johnny, you found me because I was singing songs other people wouldn't touch, songs about prisoners, about working people, about the parts of life everyone pretends don't exist. And I let you record those songs because they had commercial appeal. Folsom Prison Blues has a narrative, a character. It tells a story people can follow. This song, Phillips gestured dismissively, this is just darkness. There's no story, no resolution, just dread. That's the point. That's what it feels like to live with loss, to live with the knowledge that death is coming and there's nothing you can do about it. Johnny, I understand that. I do. But you're asking me to invest company resources, studio time, pressing costs, distribution in a song that will not make money, that will, in fact, probably cost you the audience you're building. Phillips walked back to the table, sat down. His voice was calmer now, more measured. I'm not saying don't write these songs. I'm saying don't record them, not now. Write them, perform them live if you want, but don't put them on a record that has your name on it, not yet. This kind of story about the moment when someone had to choose between the safe path and the honest one matters. If you believe that art sometimes requires risk, even when the practical choice is compromise, consider subscribing. This channel is built for people who understand that tension. Johnny Cash sat back down, looked Sam Phillips in the eye. What if I'm not here to build a career? Phillips frowned. What? What if I'm not interested in being strategic? What if I just want to make music that tells the truth about what it's like to be alive? Then you'll be poor and unknown, and you'll spend your life wondering what could have been if you'd just been willing to compromise occasionally. Or I'll be someone who didn't sell out the only thing that mattered. Phillips leaned back. His expression was hard to read. Not angry, something closer to disappointment. Johnny, you think you're the first artist I've had this conversation with? You think you're the first person who walked in here convinced that commercial success and artistic integrity are incompatible? He paused. I've worked with dozens of musicians. Some of them were more talented than you. Some of them had better voices, better songs, better stage presence. You know where they are now? Working day jobs, playing dive bars on weekends, bitter about how the industry didn't appreciate their genius. And you think that's what'll happen to me? I think that's what happens to everyone who mistakes stubbornness for integrity, who convinces themselves that if something doesn't sell, it must be too authentic for the masses. Johnny's jaw tightened. You're saying the song isn't good. I'm saying the song is unmarketable. Those are different things. You can write the most profound, moving, artistically significant song in the world, and it doesn't matter if no one will play it on the radio. Johnny stood again. This time there was anger in it. So that's it? I'm supposed to just write what you tell me to write? Perform what sells? Become whatever you think the audience wants? I'm asking you to be smart, to understand that you can't change anything if you don't survive long enough to have a platform. And how long do I have to pretend before I'm allowed to be myself? Phillips stood too. Now they were both on their feet, the small table between them. You want to know the truth, Johnny? Most artists never get there. Most people spend their entire careers chasing success, and by the time they achieve it, they'd forgotten what they wanted to say in the first place. They've been shaped by so many compromises that there's nothing authentic left. Then what's the point? The point is to be good enough, successful enough, that when you do finally say something true, people listen. That's the trade. You compromise your way to a platform, and then you use that platform to say what matters. Johnny shook his head. That's not a trade. That's a trap. You compromise until you forget why you were doing this in the first place. You become the product instead of the artist. And you stay pure and unknown and die having changed nothing.
If this moment, this collision between artistic vision and commercial reality means something to you, hit the like button. It helps these stories reach more people. That's all. Just, if it mattered, let it show. The silence that followed was heavy. Both men breathing hard, not from physical exertion, from the weight of what they were really arguing about. Sam Phillips broke it first. His voice was quieter now, almost sad. Johnny, I believe in you. I wouldn't have signed you if I didn't. But I also believe in this business, in how it works, and what it takes to survive in it. And I'm telling you as someone who's watched dozens of talented people destroy themselves by refusing to compromise, you can't fight every battle. And if I don't fight this one, what's the point of fighting any of them? Phillips walked to the door, stopped, turned back. If you record this song, I won't release it. It won't be pressed. It won't be distributed. It'll sit in a vault and no one will ever hear it. Is that what you want? Johnny's voice was steady. I want to record the song I wrote, the one that matters, not the one you think will sell. Then we're done here. Phillips opened the door, paused in the doorway. You've got a choice to make, Johnny. You can record the songs I tell you to record, and you can build a career that lasts. Or you can insist on doing it your way, and you can be right and broke and forgotten. He waited. Johnny Cash didn't move, didn't speak. Think about it, Phillips said. You've got until tomorrow. If you decide you want a career more than you want to be a martyr, come back. If not, I'll find someone else who's willing to do what it takes to succeed. He left. The door closed. Johnny Cash stood alone in that studio for a long time. Johnny Cash didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. He spent 3 days thinking, talking to June, talking to his bass player, Marshall Grant, talking to his brother, who told him Sam Phillips was right, talking to himself. And then he made a decision. He went back to Sun Records, walked into Sam Phillips' office, and said he was ready to record. Phillips seemed relieved. Good, I knew you'd come around, so we'll shelve The Man Comes Around and focus on... No, Johnny said. We're recording it. But I'll also record 2 other songs, commercial ones, songs you can release as singles. And if those songs do well, you release my song as a B-side. Phillips considered this. That's the deal? You give me commercial tracks and I give you one dark song that'll probably tank whatever single it's attached to? That's the deal. Long silence. Then Sam Phillips smiled. Not a happy smile, a resigned one. You're going to be difficult your entire career, aren't you? Probably. Fine. But if those commercial tracks don't perform, we don't waste resources on your apocalypse song. Deal? Deal. They shook hands, neither one satisfied, both knowing they'd compromised in ways that felt like betrayal. Johnny Cash recorded the commercial songs Sam Phillips wanted. They did well, not spectacular, but well enough.
The Man Comes Around never got released in 1956. Phillips delayed it, found excuses, eventually told Johnny it had been lost in a studio fire. Johnny knew he was lying, but he also knew he'd made a deal, and he'd gotten something out of it. He'd recorded the song. It existed, even if no one heard it. It would be 46 years before The Man Comes Around was released. Johnny recorded a new version in 2002 for the album American 4, The Man Comes Around. By then, he was 70 years old, dying, and the song wasn't too dark anymore. It was prophetic. It became one of his most celebrated songs. Critics called it a masterpiece, called it the culmination of everything Johnny Cash had been trying to say his entire career. But the original version, the one he recorded in 1956 in Sam Phillips' studio, that version was never released. It sat in a vault for decades, a reminder of the moment when Johnny Cash had to choose between his vision and his survival. Years later, someone asked Sam Phillips about that argument, about whether he'd been right to refuse the song. Phillips thought about it for a long time before answering. "I was right about the business. That song wouldn't have sold in 1956. It would have damaged Johnny's career. Radio stations would have rejected it. Distributors would have sent it back." He paused. "But Johnny was right about the art. That song was extraordinary, and by stopping him from releasing it, I stopped something important from existing in the world when it should have existed." The interviewer asked if he regretted it. "Every day. Because Johnny Cash could have survived releasing that song. His career would have been harder, slower, but he would have survived, and the world would have had that piece of art 46 years earlier." "So you were wrong?" "No, I was right about the wrong thing. I protected his career at the expense of his truth, and that's a trade that always feels like betrayal, even when it works." Johnny Cash never fully forgave Sam Phillips for that day in August 1956, not because Phillips was cruel, but because he represented the machine, the industry that wanted to turn artists into products, that valued marketability over truth, that asked you to compromise your way to a platform you might never actually use. But Johnny also understood, later, that Phillips had been trying to protect him, that the music industry was brutal, that careers ended every day because artists insisted on being uncompromising, when compromise would have kept them alive long enough to matter. The tragedy wasn't that one of them was right and one of them was wrong. The tragedy was that they were both right and both wrong. Phillips was right that the song wouldn't sell. Johnny was right that it should have been released anyway. Phillips was right that careers require compromise. Johnny was right that some compromises cost more than failure. That's the impossible tension every artist faces, the choice between survival and truth, between building a platform and saying what matters, between becoming successful enough to be heard and staying authentic enough to have something worth saying.
This wasn't just about one song or one argument in one studio. It was about the fundamental conflict between art and commerce, between what the world wants from you and what you need to say to survive as yourself. Sam Phillips could have released the song and risked Johnny's career. Johnny Cash could have accepted Phillips' judgment and moved on. Neither one could do what the other needed without betraying something essential in themselves. And that's what made the argument so painful, not because one of them was wrong, but because they were both trying to protect something real. Phillips was protecting Cash's future. Cash was protecting his truth. And sometimes there's no way to protect both. Sometimes you have to choose between the career you want and the artist you are, between surviving long enough to matter and saying what matters while you still can, between compromise and integrity. Johnny Cash chose compromise that day, and he regretted it for 46 years. But he also survived. And eventually, decades later, he got to record the song again,
on his own terms, when he was dying, when there was nothing left to compromise. And maybe that's the real lesson. Not that compromise is wrong, not that integrity is always worth the cost, but that the things you silence don't disappear. They wait. And if you're lucky, if you survive long enough, you eventually get to say them, even if it takes a lifetime. If stories like this matter to you, stories about impossible choices between art and survival, about the compromises that haunt us and the truths that wait, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the like button. These are the conflicts that don't have clean resolutions, where both sides have legitimate claims, where the right choice is only visible in hindsight, if at all. This is history told from inside the impossible decisions. And if that matters to you, I'm glad you're here.